God says that you will never be at peace with one another unless you love me first. You will never be happy with one another unless you love me first. You will never be intimate with one another unless you love me first. There's a lovely prayer, God be in my head, God be in my understanding, God be in my voice, God be in me, God be in my every action. That prayer can only have been said by someone who was yearning for God to live that person. The thing is, you see, for centuries and centuries and centuries, very few people have realized what is God. God is our natural state. God is our inherent state. Yes, God is love. Love, happiness, intimacy, peace. They are all part and parcel of the same. They are the attributes that is God. We are all God, but that's to be realized. It's not a head thing. It's not something to think about. It's like my mother said, I mustn't touch that because it's very hot. Okay, that's true. It's best not to touch it, but you had to touch fire at one time in your life, at least once, to realize the consequences, to realize that it is hot. That's what realization is. It has nothing whatsoever to do with belief. And it's so simple, really. Jesus comes along in a troubled society, no different to any society. It's always very troubled. And said, love God first. He didn't say love your neighbour first. Love God first. And that God he was talking about is our inherent, innate, natural state. And that state does bleed through at times. But on the whole, we keep preventing it. We block it out. We do sin, which is this self-contraction. That's what sin is. Separation from God. If that's what God is represented as, like an open hand, sin is this separation. Sin is this strangulation. Sin is this activity. There's God and there's the sinner. Nothing to do with what we do, in the form of actions and speech. It's a disposition. We're doing this to our God disposition. And because people aren't very rested, because they haven't realized that rested disposition, they're always busy, 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 busy. Never still, never quiet. If you wish to understand more about this love of God, this inherent disposition, then turn to great teachers, and my great teacher, Adidas Samraj, where he was when he was called Baba Free John, in the paradox of instruction. The paradox because the instruction itself isn't God, but it's necessary to have instruction. It's necessary to have this education. Possibly it's necessary prior to realization. When there's no none of this activity. There can only be God. So God says, love me first. God says, you will never be at peace unless you love me first. God says you will continue to seek, continue to be in conflict with one another, antagonistic towards one another, until you find me, until you know me at heart. Are you at peace with me? No. Are you at peace with yourself? No. So what does that mean, being at peace with yourself? It implies that there are two selves. The true self is already at peace with itself. It's like water. Water is already wet. It cannot make itself wet. But we can disguise water. We can make it look like paraffin. Maybe not even, maybe we could make it smell like paraffin. And paraffin is basically water with something added to it. I don't know what's added to it, but it becomes inflammable. Water isn't inflammable, but water is wet, as is paraffin. That wetness is the attribute, the quality. There's water. There are water holes which are often covered up in the desert. So what's beyond is water. It has to be found. Our true self is like water, which is God, which quenches us. It's our true food. That which is love is our true food. When God is speaking through you, speaking as you, then it's a joy to live, utter joy and delight. And then you are intimate with everything and everyone, never in conflict, never. Conflict is not necessary. Conflict is something we add. Society says you're not allowed to be happy unless there's a reason. You've done well in class, you get a gold star, then you can be happy. The wife has cooked a fantastic dinner and the husband is pleased, and then the wife can be happy. The teenager has found a lovely girlfriend. Etc. We have to have things. There has to be, in society, a reason to be happy. But to be simply happy, unreasonable, without reason, unconditionally, that's what Jesus and Buddha and Krishna and Adidar and Muktananda and Krishnamurti and Rajneesh and Osho and myself claim. It's beyond. Beyond success is often happiness. Beyond a good-looking meal is happiness. Beyond a good soup is often a happy chef. Not always, but happiness is something beyond this. And that's what is to be found out. And the prerequisite is to be fed up with this, disillusioned with it, seeing the ugliness of it. Ali Dar used to say, "Come to me when you are already happy." Well, it's like saying water to oil. Water saying to oil, "Come to me when you are already water." It's alchemy, it's metamorphosis, it's a chemical, it's a not chemical, it's a change, it's a metamorphosis change, metamorphic change. So God says that every human being is already happy. It's our natural inherent disposition. And everything else is secondary. Thank you for listening.